thank you, everyone. I'm happy to get 15 minutes, technically 15 minutes, to help you master, here's the title, Mastering Virtual Asset Regulation, a deep dive into risks, stakeholders, models, and integration. So I think if we can do mastering all of that in 15 minutes, it's going to be pretty amazing. So I think even though the title is very heavy and expansive, I feel my real role here is probably to introduce this topic and maybe a few opinions that I may have on this, and then also to tell you just a little bit about what our approach would be, but then I think there's a lot more coming up that is in this topic. So I think this is just the beginning of what a lot of people know, not necessarily just me in terms of this topic. So given that, let me just kind of get started here. So what's going on in this topic? First, clearly there's been a lot of new assets and digital assets and a lot of new entities that have kind of happened, let's say, roughly over the last decade, and kind of they happen every day. So, whether that's like this particular digital currency or that bank current, that stable coin or this or that, or it's like these exchanges, all these things are like new. And then the question is, well, what's involved in regulating virtual assets? And so I made a list here, and I'm not sure that there's any like one defined list in the world of what it means to regulate virtual assets. So this is, a list. We'll call it, a list of things. One, you start at the top and you've got defining what is a virtual asset. Okay, so that's just like, is this or is this not an asset? Number two, that's registration. And that one basically means, are you allowed in your country to buy it? Are you allowed to sell it? Do you have does the government let you do that thing? Or does the government knock on your door and say, you are not allowed to do that thing, and we're gonna punish you somehow, right? So just where do you know that you're allowed to and not allowed to? As you go down this list, I kind of ordered it in a certain way because at the top of the list, I think of these things are things that they were always there. They're very related to finance. Just maybe it's a little bit different now because it's a virtual asset, but largely that's a financial function. Like you had it in finance anyway. And as you go down, it kind of bleeds into technology, and at the bottom, it bleeds into like the more complex, like it's not just simply finance, it's not simply technology, it's not even just those two things alone. So it's getting messier as you go down. The third one is knowing the customer. That's all about like anti-money laundering and making sure that that person's allowed to receive and transact that money. After that, you've got a whole group of things that are about protecting the investor. So, is the market fair? Are you getting what you want? Are people manipulating it? Is the price changing because of things you don't know about? Then you go, kind of further down here, and it's getting more complicated, ensuring liquidity. That means that you can always sell it if you need to sell it, and this is complicated. I mean, this is getting more complicated because you're talking about things that may not be backed by anything. So it's just everybody wants it today and nobody wants it tomorrow. So you've got no liquidity, right? And because it doesn't have the value underneath it. And then finally you get to cross-border. So it's legal here, it's not legal there, it's kind of in the middle, legal somewhere else. How do you keep track? What do you do? So, you're getting into geopolitics basically when you get to the bottom of this list. So take this, and I think there's one kind of emerging question that I want to bring up, which is just how specific should you be when you regulate these things? And here's a little example. ChatGPT was introduced after GDPR. So GDPR was written. It's a whole policy on, how you protect people's data. And then this little quote here that says, ChatGPT will never comply with GDPR. So like somebody wrote a policy and then a technology is introduced and it's actually impossible for that technology to be adjusted, made, whatever, to comply with it. So when you're over prescriptive, like if you say like, this is exactly what it should look like on the screen, or it should do this thing, technology moves pretty quickly. And so then you can get very easily caught in this trap of writing and then rewriting because you didn't know that that technology changes that way. And then you got all these messy variations, and you got basically something that nobody can implement. Nobody can even understand, right? So, it's like the version, like this is oversimplified, but are you allowed to use Bitcoin to transfer money without, declaring it, or are you allowed to transfer an asset, right? So when you become specific on Bitcoin, you just made the regulation, more complicated, because next coin you get, maybe it's not called Bitcoin, but it's exactly the same idea. So here's the first kind of emerging question, is just how sharp should we write the regulations? And then if I go back to the first slide, I kind of made this point already, which was at the top. I don't want to blind you here. At the top, it's very finance specific, and then you start getting to maybe some technology can help, and you get to the bottom, and it's like very geopolitical kind of viewpoint. And my high-level way of thinking about this is that the regulator's job is to protect the people, or some combination of the people and the government, and the technology job is to find the solutions. And so people are competing in different ways to write the right regulations, and technologists, and particularly ventures, are usually coming up with the solutions to the problems. You just don't want to be coming up with solutions that you never needed to solve anyway, because the regulator made the problem instead of anyway, you get the point. Okay, so there's a range here. Another trend that's going on are regulatory sandboxes like VARA, and this is the Virtual Asset Regulatory Authority in Dubai, for example. And what they're doing is basically saying, even though there's no law, you can come and operate your digital asset currency trading, whatever here, and we'll just give you a letter that says you're allowed to, even though it's not, quote, legal. And that kind of somewhat makes it legal, and they do it for a particular time. So they can see if things kind of work, and if they work long enough, there's a path to, well, that will become legal. So this is where venture acceleration and regulation kind of ran into each other. And so you've got that going on as a trend. Okay, then, here, let's try that again. Okay, so cross-border topics. Okay, fine. So cross-border topics, if you look across the world, not everyone is allowing the same amount of things to be legal in different ways. So there's some countries, usually the darker shade means they're working on you're allowed to do it. And the kind of lighter, the lighter shades are there's legislation that says you are not allowed to do it. And somewhere in the middle, there's okay, you're allowed to do it, but we're not writing any regulation. We're just going to say if it fits the old regulations that we had before, somehow you can do it. So they're not really specifying. They're using their old laws, right? So you got this whole range of things happening, and that leads to this situation. You got one country where, okay, you're allowed to do things. You got entities and population in it. You got another country where you're not allowed to do these things. You got a third one where there's some things that are mixed. And technology goes across all of it. So, if you're an A, B, and C, there really is that same technology kind of running through. But you're in one country, you can't control the global technology. And you can't control other countries, entities outside, citizens. This is a basic global, cross-border problem. And so, let's see if I can build this out. So, the problem always comes up with you make a rule, what you're not allowed to do, and then you've got a citizen of even your own country, but they're in another place, or you got someone else who's not a citizen of your country, and they're doing something like manipulating your market, but they're not here. They're there. So what are your options? You can say, oh, well, that was illegal, but then you have no real back channel, and the technology just allows it. So your only back channel is political, which can be slow and complicated, and they may not care that that person is doing something that doesn't work against your law or whichever. And so I think where we're kind of at the result right now is simply emphasize international cooperation, try to exchange information. It's kind of like that's the kind of the best solution so far, is play nice as much as you can. But of course, there's a lot of issues there. And let me see if I can go back actually 1 second. Maybe harder than you think. So what I wanted to say here was, this is what you can do. You can control what's going on in your domain. You can control your citizens. You can, control the things on your land. And you can control your cooperation. That's about it. You can't control other people's cooperation, but you can control how much you cooperate. And I feel like that's the limit. That's kind of like where we are with things. Like, there's not more solutions than what's on this slide right now. Okay. And so all of this leads to these questions. This is what I think the kind of emerged questions have become. One, do you need different regulation? Actually, non-financial uses, do they require different regulations? Two, do you need identity to make any of this regulation actually work? Three, what will happen on the central bank currencies? Will they be regulated somehow differently? Four, cross-border, is it even possible? What could help? And remember, my basic idea here is people make regulation and people have ventures and technology, and hopefully the technologies are supposed to solve it's like one is setting up kind of the new hurdle, and the other is supposedly working on solving those. So these are supposed to work, with each other. Can DeFi specifically be regulated? Does AI have a role in regulation? I don't know the answers to all of these, but this is what we want to solve. And what we're basically doing is we are saying, if we try to solve these problems, could we do it better if we were able to mix larger firms, ventures, and researchers together? Instead of just the researchers or just entities, what if we could get them to work together? We're trying that with the IE Ripple Virtual Asset Regulation Lab, and I'm going to give you 2 minutes on what that is, and then we can talk about anything, anything you like. Okay. So the picture is we have ventures out there that we know, that we think are making a lot of change in the world. We have a lot of academics at a lot of institutions that are part of kind of a global network. We have larger companies, Ripple obviously highlighted in that list there. And we're going to get them through certain types of events to have this conversation with each other that breaks these silos. And from that, we're going to award money or have researchers propose, but not propose whatever their research originally was, propose in the gaps between what the ventures can supposedly do and what the larger company can supposedly do and what the regulator could supposedly do when they started to talk to each other. That's the basic idea, inserting the researchers in the rest of that ecosystem. All right, and so, I don't know if that's supposed to fill. Okay, so October 26th, which is actually relatively soon, we're having a global event to have this mixing of the conversation. We'll do the grant proposals and the pivots, and this is for everybody in the world, but we'll kick off those projects, and we're shooting for a super collider version, which means just the same thing but on a bigger scale in Dubai, because that's the home of the Virtual Asset Regulatory Authority. So we're working towards that, and that is, oh, sorry, one more thing. And when we do these events, one of the things that we're doing is we're building video cases. So the video case is 15 or 20 minutes long. It's an educational thing. So if you're a student, if you're a researcher, we hope to give you 15 minutes of a window into where is the problem really. Okay, the venture could do this, and this is what the regulator said. So if you're proposing research problems, highly applied ones, then it gives you that starting point. Like, okay, well, this would be a good project because I know that other people haven't really already solved it. Like, you know what all the parties are doing. That's the point on the video cases. Okay, so there I am to the thank you slide. Happy to take your questions or have a dialogue or just sit down, whichever. Do you feel like you're now masters of asset regulation now?
Yeah, we have about 30 seconds or so. So if we have one question,
I know a couple people
wants
raise their hands. Why don't you could ask?
Here we go. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you so much. That was super interesting. And I'm so curious because I would imagine that it takes a great proof of concept to get cross-border kind of functioning policies on board with lots of different countries. So what are the strategies for a pilot or like a kind of minimum viable policy that you could use as a proof of concept to get countries on board that might need something to go off of before blindly jumping into a new cross-border policy?
Okay, yeah, super great question, super hard question for sure. I think my short answer will be, I think we'll take the premise that we can't change any policy in any country. So, it's going to come down to, can technology assist in at least knowing what's allowed and not allowed or whatever? Maybe there's an AI angle there. There's kind of a cat and mouse thing that seems to happen all the time. It's like, you get this new capability, and then it comes with 5 new problems, and then all the technologists say, but that's okay, those 5 problems can be solved with more technology. And then we don't know yet what the problems from those new technologies will be, but I think that's kind of the game that happens. So can't change the rules, but maybe some of the AI or maybe some other things could help us in at least what we know the problem is right now.
Cool, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Well, great. I wish we had more time for more questions. I have but like you're here, so
absolutely.
During the breaks, please come down and ask him any questions. So
yeah.
Thank you again.
No, thank you. Yeah. Thanks. I appreciate the invitation. Yeah.